fingers would remember their old strength better if they grasped your sword.
Swords, swords, swords. Big swords, little swords, knife swords. Hello and welcome to The Broken Sword. Today, if you couldn't guess it, we are going to be looking at the most iconic and legendary swords from Middle-earth.
Build me an army worthy of Mordor.
I have never used a sword in my life.
And I hope you never have to.
Weapons are extremely important to the characters of Middle-earth. It is like an extension upon their arm. It is like another part of their soul that lives through their weapon. It's the thing that they really trust their lives with, whether that be a sword, a bow, an axe, a spear, or anything else they can get their hands on. It really just symbolizes the person that wields it. So my plan is over time to go through all the legendary different weapons we can find in Middle-earth, and I thought what better place to start with than the most iconic and legendary swords. So, let's jump into it. Let us start off with one of the swords that was made all the more famous for the legendary Peter Jackson trilogy, and that is the sword of Herugrim. Herugrim was the sword that belonged to King Théoden of Rohan during the time of the War of the Ring. The meaning of its name is very fierce or cruel and savage in Rohirric, and although it most famously belonged to King Théoden, it had existed for over 500 years as it got passed down from king to king who had ruled Rohan. It was also a great symbol of Theoden's recovery after he had been cured by Gandalf of Saruman and Grima Wormtongue's poison, as it was this blade he wielded as he rode to war during the Battle of the Hornburg, as well as his final fight during the Battle of the Pelennor Fields. A great sword for a great king and a great place to start. For the next sword, we're going to go back a wee bit before the Lord of the Rings to the time of Turambar and his sword of Gurthang. This sword is the first on our list that is a reforging of an older sword, but it will also not be the last, as this one was reforged from the blade called Anglachel, which originally was forged by Eol the Dark Elf, and this was from a meteorite that he had found. It was given as a gift to King Thingol of Doriath, and then later taken by Beleg Strongbow when searching for Turin. Turin would accidentally slay his friend though, in a case of mistaken identity. Turin had thought that he was about to be tortured by orcs, except it was actually Beleg rescuing him from his capture. So Turin reforged it from this horrific moment, and as Gurthang it was black and shone with pale fire, and he used it to kill an Easterling chief named Rodda, achieve many victories while fighting from Nargothrond, and finally and most famously, slaying the dragon Glaurung. Although this is where the stories for this sword would stop, as Turin would take his own life with this very blade, and with that act, the blade broke as well, with it then being buried with Turin himself. Now we will fast forward again back towards the times of the Hobbit to an elven blade that was made famous by a dwarf, Thorin Oakenshield, and this is the blade of Orcrist. But as well as him, it was sure to have had many more owners, albeit none that are named, as it was forged in the great city of Gondolin during the First Age. Even though most know it by the name Orcrist, it also went by two other names, and these are either Biter, as it was known by the goblins, or Goblin Cleaver from its Sindarin translation. Orcrist was known to have taken the lives of hundreds of goblins in its time, when the elves of Gondolin continuously hunted them in the hills surrounding their hidden city. However, after the fall of Gondolin, its whereabouts appear unknown until it is found in a troll's cave by Thorin and his company during the quest of Erebor. This is where Thorin takes ownership of it and has its history confirmed by Elrond Half-Elven when passing through Rivendell. However, when the Dwarven company would then be captured by the Elves of Mirkwood, it would be taken from him. Saying this though, after his death during the Battle of the Five Armies, King Thranduil of Mirkwood returned Orcrist to Thorin and let it be buried upon his chest. After talking about Orcrist, it only seems to make sense to talk about the other main sword found in that troll horde, Glamdring. This blade is most well known for being wielded by Gandalf during the War of the Ring. However, it was created during the same time as Orcrist within the city of Gondolin, so they were actually considered to probably have fairly similar histories. Although similar, Glamdring was considered the greater of the two though, for it was originally wielded by the king of Gondolin himself, Turgon. And with this sword, he would have killed a large number of orcs, as they named it as Beta or Foe Hammer, and would flee simply from the sight of it. This legend actually became so well known that it was remembered all the way into the Third Age of Middle-earth by the orcs who lived in the Misty Mountains.
He wields the foe hammer, the beater.
The next portion of its history is not known, just that, like that of Orcrists, all that can be guessed by what Elrond says is that they were most likely just plundered time after time until eventually they happened to reach the Cave of the Trolls in Eriador, where it was found. So from this point, Glamdring would travel with Gandalf throughout the rest of his time in Middle-earth, even into the depths of Moria while fighting the Balrog, and it was still with him after being returned as Gandalf the White until the end of his time in Middle-earth. However, this is the point when its end fate becomes unclear or unknown. It is never mentioned specifically if he took it with him to the west or not. Some think he could have, after all, he did take Shadowfax with him, but some others also think he may have left it behind, as no weapons would be needed by the time he reached the Undying Lands. This is one of those times where, realistically, you can believe in whichever outcome you want to. For the next sword we must travel back to the First Age again, and this is a fairly quick one, with the sword named Ringil. Now, Ringil was the blade that was wielded by the first High King of the Noldor, Fingolfin, and with this sword in his hand, he was said to have accomplished one of the greatest deeds ever achieved in the lands of Middle-earth. He took this sword, which was said to have glittered like ice, and with such vicious madness, he rode alone to Angband to challenge the Dark Lord Morgoth to single combat. With Ringil, Fingolfin managed to wound Morgoth 7 times. But sadly was still defeated by the great power of the Dark Lord. However, Morgoth would never fully recover from these wounds, being stuck with a permanent limp from this point on. And sadly, there is no more knowledge of this weapon after this event.
What are you saying? My sword hasn't seen battle?
Not actually sure it is a sword.
Now, before we carry on with the most powerful swords, I thought we would take a bit of a sidestep and look at maybe those knives and daggers that don't quite qualify as a fully fledged sword. And what better place to start with all of these than the legendary blade, Sting. Sting was believed to have been forged during the First Age in Gondolin, just like the likes of Glamdring and Orcrist, as it was also to be one of those blades that glowed when orcs and goblins were near. As most of you will likely know, this was the elvish knife that was found by the company of Thorin Oakenshield during the adventures of the Hobbit by none other than Bilbo Baggins. Nothing is known of it before the point it was found by Bilbo, but from here it would stay on Bilbo's hip for the rest of his journey and all the time until he passed it on to Frodo Baggins in Rivendell during the Lord of the Rings. As we know, the knife succeeded in many great deeds, from fighting off the forest spiders of Mirkwood to fighting off the great spider Shelob. And a fun fact here, Sting was in fact the only blade to ever even inflict a wound to Shelob. It did possess special properties after all, like, of course, it glowed when orcs were near, but more than that, it was exceptionally sharp. For example, it could painfully stab and wound the cave troll within Khazad-dûm when the likes of Boromir's sword could do no more than glance off his hide. Also, Sam's normal sword could not cut the webs of Shelob, but Sting could slice through them like a knife through butter. Sting ended its time being left to Samwise Gamgee after Frodo left for the Undying Lands, but it is unknown whether Sam took it with him when he too would sail west, or if instead it was left as an heirloom to his family in generations to come. Again, this has an ending that really you can believe whatever you wish. For the next not quite a sword type blade, let us have a look at the Morgul Blade. Now this was famous for the damage it caused, as this was the long, poisonous dagger that was used by the Nazgûl. It is well known for being used by the Witch King specifically to stab Frodo upon Weathertop, and due to the effects of it, meaning if the wound went untreated, Frodo would have become a wraith himself. The effects of this blade were only able to be stopped by the strongest of healers, but it was also possible to slow with Athelas, also known as Kingsfoil.
Kingsfoil are to weed!
Even when I say stopped here though, it was never completely healed. It was only actually when Frodo finally sailed to the west that he ever stopped feeling the effects of it. A very deadly blade for a deadly servant of Sauron. And for another dagger amongst our swords, let's look at the daggers of Westernesse. These blades were the ones given to the 4 hobbits in the Fellowship of the Ring by Tom Bombadil after he rescued them from the clutches of the Barrow Wights. They are described as having long leaf-shaped blades damasked with serpent forms in red and gold. They were said to have been forged by the Dúnedain of Cardolan many years ago with the sole purpose of fighting against the darkness of the Witch King. Sam, Merry and Pippin would keep their daggers, but Frodo's would be broken at the fords of Bruinen, with him then later receiving Sting as a replacement. The greatest sign of the importance of these blades is how Merry used one to stab the Witch King in the back of the knee, and this act solely, is the one that broke the spell that held together the spirit of the Lord of the Nazgûl to its body. This is what led the opportunity for Éowyn to stab him through the face. Something that would have been impossible without Merry's dagger first, albeit this also caused the blade itself to wither and vanish like a dry branch in a fire. Almost like a, your mission is done, and now you can go. Continuing with our knives, we're going to go back to that tumultuous time in the First Age, where we find a remarkable blade named Angrist. Forged by the renowned dwarf smith Taukar, Angrist was crafted for the elf lord Curufin. The destiny of this exceptional knife, also known as Iron Cleaver in Sindarin, took a dramatic turn in the Forest of Brethil, where Curufin and his brother Celegorm had a fateful encounter with Beren and Luthien. The brothers' nefarious plot to kidnap Luthien was thwarted, and in their defeat, Angrist slipped from Curufin's grasp, becoming a spoil of war. Later, during the daring quest for the Silmaril, Angrist found itself in Beren's hands as he embarked on his perilous mission. With its sharp edge, Beren deftly cut a Silmaril from the mighty Iron Crown of Morgoth himself. However, the blade's triumph was short-lived, as Beren attempted to sever a second jewel. Angrist's blade then tragically snapped, stirring Morgoth from his slumber as a shard grazed his cheek. This moment marked the end of Angrist's journey, as Beren, clutching the Silmaril, had to abandon the knife during his narrow escape. Angrist's legacy, etched in Middle-earth's history, remains a testament to the extraordinary craftsmanship of Taukar and the knife's brief but significant role in the timeless tale of courage and adventure. Going back to the swords now, but staying in the First Age, we are going to find the legendary blade of King Thingol of Doriath, Aranrúth. This blade, named King's Ire in Sindarin, was the prized possession of King Thingol of Doriath, one of the most formidable rulers of the elves. Aranrúth was not merely a weapon, it was a symbol of Thingol's sovereignty and strength. So much so that when Beleg, a great warrior of Doriath, sought a worthy sword for his quest to find Turin, Thingol allowed him to choose any sword from his armory except for Aranrúth, a testament to the sword's significance and the king's attachment to it. The saga of Aranrúth did not end with Thingol's tragic demise. This venerable sword was inherited by his descendants, witnessing the tumult and turmoil of elven history. In a pivotal moment, Elwing, Thingol's great-granddaughter, salvaged Aranrúth during the Second Kingslaying, an act of valor that preserved the sword's legacy. Aranrúth's journey continued as it passed into the hands of Elros, the half-elven, who chose the path of mortality to become the first king of Númenor. In Númenor, Aranrúth attained a new realm of reverence, becoming a treasured heirloom of the Númenorian kings. Generation after generation, the sword symbolized the authority and wrath of the rulers of this mighty island kingdom. However, like many great relics of Middle-earth, Aranrúth's tale is tinged with a note of tragedy. The sword, which had seen the rise of kings and the glory of an age, was ultimately lost in the cataclysmic downfall of Númenor. Its fate, shrouded in the mists of time, leaves Aranrúth as a legendary memory in the annals of Middle-earth, remembered for its majesty and the pivotal role it played in the hands of those who wielded it across the ages. And now for debatably the most iconic of all of the swords from Middle-earth, we must look no further than Andúril, Flame of the West, also known as the reforged sword of Narsil. Andúril was the sword of Aragorn the King that started its life as a symbol of the kingship of Arnor and Gondor, as an heirloom of the descendants of the first king of Númenor, Elros. Narsil would eventually work its way to Elendil, and he carried it into the Battle of Dagorlad, and this is where it was broken at the end of the Second Age, breaking under Elendil's fallen body at the hands of Sauron. But this is where Isildur took the fragments of his father's sword and cut the ring from Sauron's hand after the Dark Lord had fallen. Then after this, its fragments remained with the kings of Arnor and later the chieftains of the Dúnedain. It was passed down from generation to generation until it was finally reforged by the elven smiths of Rivendell, and this is where it changed from Narsil to Andúril. After all, Elrond had said that it would not be forged again until Sauron had returned, or more specifically, when the One Ring returned, as it is said in the chapter of the Council of Elrond. For the sword that was broken is the sword of Elendil that broke beneath him when he fell. It has been treasured by his heirs when all other heirlooms were lost, for it was spoken of old among us that it should be made again when the ring, Isildur's bane, was found. and it was here during the War of the Ring that Aragorn famously wielded it, and this helped Aragorn establish himself as the heir of Isildur and Elendil, and it is this blade that played the pivotal role in convincing the dead men of Dunharrow to fulfill their oath that Isildur had cursed upon them. The ending of the story of this sword is not actually known either though, but many believe it was buried with Aragorn after his passing. But who knows, perhaps it was actually passed down to his son to become an heirloom of his legendary line. So there we have it, a look through some of the most iconic and legendary swords ever found in Middle-earth. The weapon of the warrior, the sword, the knife, is one of those that really extends the arm of the person wielding it. It becomes another part of their body and almost another part of their soul. So many of these weapons have such amazing stories just in themselves that some of them almost deserve videos in their own right. So if you would like to see a full video on a weapon like Anguirel, I would definitely be happy to make that all for you. Just let me know that that's the kind of thing you want to see. But I will definitely be working on those other weapons videos for you as well. There may even be one or two swords you think that I've missed off today, like Hadhafang, the legendary sword of Arwen and Elrond from the films. But this is a film-only sword that has been made by Weta Workshop and not one from the lore, which is why it hasn't been mentioned. Or perhaps Beren's sword, Dagmor, which is mentioned in the lore, however we never get anything more than its name, so there was really nothing to say. I've tried just to stick to the main named ones, but if there are any that I've missed off this list that you do want to mention, please leave me a comment down below. But either way, I hope that you've enjoyed this video for today, and I hope to see you next time. With that now though, it is time for my question of the day, which is, if you could own any of these swords, which would you choose? Why not tell me if this was the case in real life now, or if it was in fact in Middle-earth itself? Let me know your thoughts and reasons for these in the comments down below. And now it is time to give a massive thank you to our patrons who continue to support the channel. You are all amazing. And if you have reached the very end of this video with me today and you haven't subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. It would massively help us out. And why not drop a like on the video as well? And with that, all I can say is, thank you for spending just some of your time with me today, and I will see you next time on The Broken Sword.
Andúril, flame of the west, forged from the shards of Narsil.